Future makers, on the other hand, instead of being a little bit scared about the future, they rush out and look into the future. They want to know what's going to happen. They want to read the signs and begin to interpret the signs of a future world. And they are determined to find a space for themselves in that future. Future makers don't want to respond to change, they want to lead change. They want to make the future happen, not just take the future as it comes along. Well, it takes a generation to do that, 25 years or more before you see these big transformations. But if we're going to be future makers, and you can see I'm erring on the side that let's not be content to be takers of the future. Why don't we, if health promotion is not about making the future, what is it about? If we want to be future makers, what's got to change? Government policy, and in the case of Ngāi of whānau, iwi assurances and leadership are critical to become future makers. In terms of government policy, it's never a question of abandoning one and doing the other. It's a question of shifting balance. The biomedical priorities, which seem to be stacking up as the major current preoccupation, have got to be balanced by macro government policies that have something to do with carbon emissions, eco-environmental protection, eco-friendly consumerism, and ready for disaster. If we ignore global warming, we do it at our own peril. There's still an argument going on of some people saying it doesn't really exist. It's a figment of scientific imagination. It does exist, and most countries in the world have accepted that. New Zealand just about has, I think. But you would expect a government macro policy to be talking about the health of the planet as much as the health of its people. The two go together. We as a people can never be healthy if our planet's not healthy. What about the Treaty of Waitangi? The current approach to the treaty is that it's a statutory requirement and there's some risk for the government attached to it. That's a colonial attitude to something that was signed in 1840. The real message about the Treaty of Waitangi is that this is an opportunity for New Zealand's future. Now that the settlements are more or less tidied up, no, it's half a dozen to go yet, including L1, which will be a stumbling block, but all the big ones are done. Now's the opportunity to stop using the treaty as something to address grievances in the past, and to start using the treaty, Maori and the Crown working together, to look at opportunities for the future. The treaty challenge is to put the future, an agenda for New Zealand's future, on the table. And that requires a whole different approach. The adversarial bargaining is of no help when you're talking about a joint future. So there is opportunity to change that. The other approach is health inequalities. A huge focus on measuring Maori against non-Maori measures. It's got some advantage, but it doesn't take you necessarily where you want to go. The big shift, I think, has got to be measuring outcomes, looking at what are the best outcomes, interpreting best outcomes that make sense to the people who are most affected. And the health sector responsiveness, the more you look at health, and the more you look at the social determinants and the cultural determinants of health, the more you realise that the health sector is a very limited answer to New Zealand's health problems in the future, and that will be increasingly so. A health sector response is not enough, and it's not a sufficient response for tomorrow, looking at whole of government responsiveness. There is no government department which does not have some responsibility for health. Pull them all together, that's a problem for the government, but it's a shift that we ought to think about more and more moving into the next 25 years. What do iwi do about this? Is there any actions that iwi might want to take? Iwi have got a lot of health programs. Many of them have got 30 or 40 contracts, different contracts with DHB. Spend most of the time doing milestone reports. Some iwi are trying to have whole of health contracts where they have a different set of outcomes, but that approach of dealing with DHB has really got to make use of what iwi can do best, which is to have a holistic approach to health. And instead of having individual contracts, each with their own team of workers who don't necessarily have much to do each other, this is an opportunity to work towards an integrated approach to health care and social care and educational care and crime prevention, to do that on a much more integrated way. And there's a challenge there, but that's the direction that we can see is needed. Health servicing, we've got quite good at developing health services, the government management. The shift really is that we've got to balance building the health workforce with empowering whānau. Whānau will be the health workforce over time. Other systems will come and go. Whānau will probably be around as agents for health longer than systems will be. And so the whole focus on building Māori health capability has got to be balanced by a new focus on empowering whānau to do what they have to do, and I'll tell you what they're going to do in a minute, in case they don't know. And the other point is this access to services, which has been a major focus, a good focus in the last 25 years, because access wasn't good, but access is now quite good. That now has to be balanced by a focus on prevention. It's not a question of accessing health service, but a question of preventing the need to access health services. That'll be the challenge. And what does that mean for Māori health leaders? The Māori who are involved in health, there's a whole network of Māori health leaders. The disease focus, that has been a concentration of interest, needs to continue, and people are still going to have diabetes, still going to have heart attacks, still going to get cancer, so still need to have that, but that's got to be balanced by a focus on looking at whānau empowerment. That's the challenge for Māori leaders. Māori health workforce development has got to be balanced by integrating the Māori workforce generally, so that the Māori health workforce, the Māori workforce, is not split into the same sectors necessarily that government chooses as a manageable way of delivering services. And health sector leadership needs to be thinking also about sector leadership for Māori as generally, and I'm talking about Māori as a single integrated sector. What does this mean? Notions of care and support have got to give way to notions of empowerment. Caring and supporting have a patronising and a paternalistic quality about them, and often expect that people will always need to be cared for and supported. That's an attitude which ought to give way to an attitude of empowerment as the aim of what we do. Individual health status has really got to be managed, balanced by an approach to whānau capability. Māori models of health care, good for health practitioners, whare tapawhā, te pai mahutanga, great for health practitioners. They may not be the models that are best suited for whānau to be empowered with. We might need to look at models of health, kawa, that whānau can use for their own guidance in promoting health. And there's a challenge there for the next generation of health leaders. And leading health sectors or sectors who lead delivery systems, we've got to get round to the idea that whānau ought to be at the centre, whānau at the centre, and the services that deliver are their clients. So the whānau call the shots, and they go to this client, that client for something, another one, and that they have choice. And if all of the agencies working with whānau can actually have the same, sing from the same sheet, that would be a wonderful celebration in 2035. Crisis management, which dominates healthcare for whānau at present, is good, but it's brief. And as soon as the emergency is over, it's over. It doesn't do anything to build capability or resilience. And crisis management and crisis resolution really needs to be extended so that the crisis solving the emergency is step one. Step two, which is a much longer process, is building capability and building resilience so that future crises don't occur, and if they do, the whānau know how to manage them themselves.